Hey, folks. Thanks for being here. We're going to hang on a little bit while we wait for the people on Facebook to show up. Lovely to see people here from Austin, Texas. You must be roasting. Houston, Austin and Houston both next to each other. And Colorado Springs, all you Westerners out there. Hey, Kristen, how are you? And here is Carrie from Facebook. So it looks like Facebook is coming on now. Let's jump right into it then. I'm incredibly excited today, as I told you yesterday, to have Zach Everson here. He's a staff writer for Forbes. And I don't know about you, but I know that I need to know about cryptocurrency and how it's involved in politics, but it's really kind of vague for me. And his work is the one that opened the door for me. And when I asked if he would come explain it to everybody, he said yes. So I'm thrilled to have him here. And we were talking a bit before this began. And I think the story of how Zach became an expert on cryptocurrency is sort of interesting. So welcome, Zach. Thank you for being here. And can you start by telling us how you got involved in doing this?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks so much for everybody for tuning in for this on a Friday afternoon. I went to college with the intent to be a journalist, and I had an internship covering sports, and I hated it. So I did not actually go into journalism. I went into banking, did some consulting, and didn't really enjoy that either. And around 2024, 25, I had a midlife crisis. I sold a condo here in the DC area for twice what I paid for it, and I went backpacking through Europe. I traveled extensively through the US, but not really overseas at all. So I did this big trip and just absolutely got bit by the travel bug, started reading travel blogs. When I came back, some were looking for writers. I started writing for them. Most of the time, though, my money was coming from freelance editing gigs for USAID contractors and defense contractors. But the travel writing picked up over time, and got to see some wonderful places, go all around the world. Got the assignment for Fox News, of all outlets, to cover the opening of Trump's hotel here in DC. If you remember, that was right before the 2016 election. And I was kind of getting tired of travel writing. It's wonderful perks. It is difficult to tell your wife and kids that you're going to leave them for a week for an article that'll pay you $500. And I love politics. So I realized this was an opening for me to get into political coverage, that just focusing on this hotel, it seemed like it was going to be a huge problem during the first term. It was. And nobody, I thought, was really giving it the coverage it needed. So I started paying attention to it like a hawk, looking on social media at who was there, why they might want to be there. One of the key finds I had was John Ledger, the CEO of T-Mobile, was there the day after his company announced it was merging with Sprint. We later on found out that they spent a lot of money there, but it was a picture on Instagram that showed us first how he was trying to influence this merger, apparently. Trump lost the election, was about to sell the hotel. January 6th happened. I figured, he's gone. I should probably find something else to report on. And I reached out to Forbes editor Dan Alexander, who had been a subscriber to my newsletter, said, hey, will you be a reference for this job? And he responded with, sure, but would you rather work here? And the answer was absolutely. So I have now been at Forbes for the last 4 years. It was supposed to be money in politics with just a little bit of Trump, but that really hasn't played out over the last few years. It is now back to Trump pretty much full time.
Well, and you said that you think one of the big undercovered stories of the Trump administration is his finances, right?
I do. I really think, and I mean, yes, I realize that this is a little brash getting on and saying, hi, the thing I write about, nobody else pays enough attention to. But, there's some great coverage out there from a lot of outlets, but it is difficult for Trump's finances to break through and become the top story of the day. It happens sometimes. It happened in the first administration when he tried to host the G7 at Doral. It happened most recently with his big dinner here in the DC area for owners of his meme coin. But most of the time, there are more important issues going out there. I mean, just think this week, we had mayoral elections in New York, bombing Iran. I mean, also Supreme Court decisions coming down today. So it's hard for the Trump financial news to break through sometimes. So it seems like it's something that just needs to be covered, day in, day out, and hopefully people will come to it and they'll just kind of make it part of their news diet.
Okay, so let's dive into cryptocurrency. First of all, help me out here. Is it really just money laundering?
It can be, but it's not. It's certainly not. Like any sort of financial instrument, it can be used for good. It can be used for evil. I didn't have much understanding of it until recently when I started getting into it, when I saw this is where Trump's finances were heading. Several years ago, I bought some Bitcoin just to kind of go through what it was like. I spent $100 on it, opened up an account. It was very much the same experience as opening a bank account. They asked me a whole bunch of know your customer questions, and I went through that process. I did not get rich from it. I made a little bit of money, but not a ton. So I was familiar with it in that regard. And then when Trump got into it, I realized this is where I needed to start paying attention to, instead of looking to see who is at his properties, the real story of his business this term was going to be crypto. So yeah, you find all sorts of sketchy uses for it. There are legitimate uses where I come in. I'm not really a crypto skeptic in this, but I just don't see why you need crypto in a lot of instances. Sure, it can do these things, but why do you need this as opposed to existing financial instruments?
So you just said something really interesting right there about how the story of the first term was the people using Trump's properties, for example, to funnel money toward him. And you are suggesting that in this term, it's crypto that is essentially enabling people to put money in Trump's pocket. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was all set to go at the beginning of this term on paying attention to who was at his properties. I thought of everything I did right last time, everything I did wrong. I had a whole tracking system. I was in play. And then, it just hit me a couple days into it. Why am I paying attention to who's dropping 100,000, maybe 100,000? The big story that we never could get nailed down of his first term was there were all sorts of rumors that different countries, different companies were spending money at his hotel without actually using them. They were booking the ballroom and not going. Never got proven. Mark Zuckerberg was asked about it in congressional testimony, whether Facebook did it. No, we never got anything there. But even then, the money involved is just a pittance compared to what you're seeing happening here in crypto, where you're seeing $1 million deals with foreign governments getting announced regularly. Just today we had, I think it was the UAE, announced that it had made a major multi-million-dollar purchase of one of Trump's crypto products. Sorry, $100 million was what it was. $100 million of one of his crypto products. So, who cares about a couple of cocktails when that's at stake?
All right. So first of all, what is the best way for us to understand this? And can you just start walking us through what we need to know?
Yeah. Trump's gone into crypto. It's very broad. He's gone from somebody who's being very crypto skeptic, calling it thin air, to realizing that hey, money can be made out of thin air. Let me get in on this. And so I think if the easiest way to go through it is kind of chronologically as he launched these different products, and they give a good overview of what the products are, what they do, how they may or may not play into what the government's working now. So the first one that he did was the Trump digital trading card. Now, he launched those in 2022. He's gone on to launch several more series of them. They did well. He's making money off it just from a marketing deal. They've paid, to the best of our knowledge, they've paid to license his image. They have these big cartoonish images of him that you can buy and trade. And think about those very much like you would a sports trading card. Those are, you collect these things. We live digitally now. So, here, I've got my Megan Rapinoe card right in front of me. It's mine. It's mine because it's in my hand and I'm in my house and this is mine. But if I want to go up and put it digitally and show, hey, I have a Megan Rapinoe card, this doesn't quite do the trick. Oh, great. You have a screenshot of it. Well, by these non-fungible tokens, NFTs, they're on the blockchain. So there's a ledger. So I can prove that I own it. And that way you can see there would be, that the digital version of this would be mine, which makes sense in a way. If you're looking for art or any sort of collectibles, to have that sort of proof of ownership when you're doing it digitally.
Real quickly,
yeah.
Explain to people what blockchain is. This is the part I understand that I think is cool.
Okay. The blockchain is a public ledger. It's like a Google document that shows all the transactions that are done. Now, they're different blockchains, but it will show all of them. So it doesn't have your name on there, but it would have your account number. So that's one of the whole things with crypto being anonymous. It's not really anonymous because you can see what the accounts are and you can see the transactions. They may not know the account belonged to me or to you, but you can see where they go. And that's where the FBI can start reaching in, law enforcement can start going to some of these crypto exchanges and saying, hey, who's the name behind account 217953, and starting to figure this out. And that's when some of these exchanges have gotten into trouble, is that they didn't actually have that information when a law enforcement came calling. So that would be what the blockchain is. Does that match your definition?
So the first, well, I like them because of the record, that the whole idea behind a blockchain is it's essentially provenance. So I think of it like a painting, for example, if you had the list of every single person who had touched that painting since it was painted, as a historian, that's solid gold. So I just think that's cool. I have no reason to have any business with it. I just think it's a cool concept and that we can do that in the modern world. But okay, so the first thing we're supposed to be paying attention to is the Trump digital trading cards. And people really invest in that.
People bought them to trade them. They were selling for about $99. Ironically, they sometimes come with physical products. Like they shredded up one of his suits, either the suit he wore for his mugshot, and I think the suit that he wore in his debate against Joe Biden. They put through a shredder, and you will get physical cards with those attached to it. But they're selling. As you're shaking your head, yeah, it's pretty
I just don't start. Okay.
There is. I would love to find a list of things that Donald Trump has not put his name on. Like, I would really like to go through that. It reminds me of that old Saturday Night Live commercial where Dan Aykroyd's selling like a bag of charred glass for children. Anyway, they're selling on the resale market right now anywhere from $75, which would be below face, to about $170, which would be above. All sorts of factors there. Which ones are more desirable, which image appeals, which ones might be rarer. First editions will typically do better than later editions. So you can go ahead and buy those on the secondary market right now. And it has not been one of his biggest moneymakers. He said about $7 million from licensing fees, but it certainly showed him there was good money to be made from crypto.
So that's essentially a Beanie Baby.
Yeah, any sort of trading card or, art, anything that can be traded like that. Absolutely. Do you need to have it? No. Do I need to have my stack of soccer cards here? I don't. I like having them. They bring me a little happiness. Maybe they'll go up in value. That's it. Like, I don't view these as an investment. Part of the problem that people run into is when they think about some of these crypto products as investments, which is how they're pumped up to be. If you go to buy sports cards, they don't often hype up, oh, you're going to make a ton of money on this. It's there in the background. They're price guides, they're dealers, but it's not as upfront and in your face as it is with a lot of the crypto products.
Okay, so that's our first one then, the digital trading card.
Yes. So then came World Liberty Financial, abbreviated WLF. That came in September 2024, almost exactly at the same period of the election cycle as when he opened his DC hotel. So here you've got time to where he's running for the highest office out there. And in both instances, he was able to take a little time off for a press conference for the hotel or to get out there and tout World Liberty. So what World Liberty is, and this one was one of the harder concepts for me to get. It's a decentralized finance platform, often abbreviated DeFi, DEFI. Think of it as a co-op, only it's run by code. You buy tokens of this platform, and that's essentially an ownership stake, and it's a digital contract. So in this instance, the members would use shared rules called smart contracts to lend, borrow, or create the rules of the platform. There's no central boss, just this common infrastructure. So it's a digital way of having some sort of partnership like that, which again, seems like it could be really helpful. I mean, how many times do business partnerships dissolve because there's disputes about contracts? Well, if you have it all digitally and there's a record of it there, it's a lot easier to unwind. Now whether that's worth all the other problems with crypto, the electricity and all that I don't know.
Okay, so I'm quite surprised, actually. You said the Trump digital trading card was in what year? 2022?
That was 2022. Yeah.
Okay, so they're all of a sudden, just before the election, all this is taking off.
Yeah.
So we have WLF, and that's the second thing you were going to talk about. What was the third?
Sure. So let me just continue with WLF for a moment, if I can. So that one way he makes money of it is through selling those tokens. And those tokens originally could not be transferred, which apparently is rare. Usually you could resell them. They just announced recently that they're going to allow for resales. Donald Trump and his family have 22.5 billion tokens of World Liberty Financial that when we last valued him, we didn't really ascribe anything to him because he couldn't sell them. Well, soon he's going to be able to sell them. Now, can he just dump them all? No, because it would probably tank the market. But it did just open up a big avenue for him to make some money.
Wait, hold on just a second. Did he have to pay for those 22.5 billion, or did they just say these are yours?
I don't believe he paid for almost any of this. Everything here is pretty much a licensing deal, to the best of my knowledge. It is him getting the merch in exchange for letting them plaster his face all over these products and put them out there. So
okay, so now you can sell those.
Yes, and he has sold part of the company already. Originally, if you look at the small print on it on the website, it originally said he owned 75. He and his family members owned 75% of it. Then it came down to 60, and I think it was last week we saw it drop to 40. So they have been making some deals in the background as well that we really don't know about. World Liberty Financial, though, has been getting in the news because it is also the outfit behind his stablecoin. And that is what has really been in the news of late. This is USD1. It was announced in March 2025 and launched the following month. So what a stablecoin is it's a currency pegged to the United States dollar in most instances, and it's backed by reserves in U.S. treasuries and other similarly held, conservative products, like what a money market should have its money invested. World Liberty, currently there is no audit of it, but they just announced yesterday or today that they will release an audit to show that they have the reserves to back up what the currency is. And that is what we saw. We've heard about stable coins being used for mortgages. It's also what we said, what was it? I think it was UAE or Dubai announced that it was going to use his stable coin to invest in Binance. So what they're doing here is they are essentially giving World Liberty Financial X amount of dollars in real currency that World Liberty can then invest. And then they are using the stable coin to go make another investment there. So what happens is if you're making a $2 billion purchase using Trump's stable coin, you are giving $2 billion to a company that Donald Trump is a major owner of. I believe he gets 45%. He and his family members get 45% of any interest earned off the reserves. So you're giving Donald Trump $2 billion to invest, and he would get 45% of that off there. So again, a very easy way to give him some money.
Right. Can you, I get this because I read you, Zach, but can you explain that once more for people, that a foreign country put $2 billion into the stable coin to complete a different purchase? It was a purchase for a piece of a crypto exchange, I think, right?
Exactly.
But the way it works, according to you, if I'm correct, is that if you give somebody that money, obviously they're going to use it for something else, but all the investments that they make with that money while they are holding it becomes the property of the company itself. And you're saying the Trump family gets 45% of that? Is that correct?
It's 45% of the profits from any interest that's made on that. Think of it as a Starbucks app. You give Starbucks your money, and in this instance, you then will exchange it for coffee. But that whole time, Starbucks is sitting on your cash, and they're most likely investing it. They're not just like sitting it in an account where it's not doing anything. If you think of all the people in the world who have Starbucks cards, it's a sizable chunk of change they can be making there. That's very similar to how this works. Only instead of, putting $50 on a time from, a random person like me, probably way too often. But instead of doing that, you've got foreign government, or in this case, it was a exchange venture capital fund, I believe, that was backed by a foreign government, taking that money, giving it to the stable coin, and then using the stable coin to invest in Binance, which is another platform.
Right. Okay. So we've got the digital trading cards. We've got the World Liberty Financial. We've got the stablecoin, the USD1. What else? Anything?
Yeah, absolutely. We can keep going. Two more here. We've got the meme coin, which is probably the one that people know the most about, because that famously, the top owners of that got to go to a dinner at Trump's DC area golf club, and the super top owners got a tour of the White House. Sounds nice. So that he launched 3 days before taking office in 2025.
Okay, but tell us what a meme coin is.
It is a digital currency with no intrinsic value. It's based on hype. There's no reserve or anything like there. I made one. I just kind of wanted to better understand what a meme coin was. So I pulled up my phone. There's a site or app called pump.fun, and I was walked through by a friend of mine how you can create one. It took about 15 minutes. My meme coin was named Larry, probably because I'm a big Larry Bird fan, and that was just the first name that came to mind. I put a stupid picture on there, and then it hit the market, and people bought it. A few people bought it.
Wow.
And then when it didn't go to the moon quickly, and they realized it was not going to be a good opportunity, people then sold it. But what happened was I kept most of it. So if those people had driven the price way up, well, I'm holding 60, 70% of it. I would stand to make a lot of money. And that's often called a rug pull, where you'll see a big hype about a meme coin. It was in the news recently with viral sensation, whose name I won't say. was accused of being behind one of these, where they hyped up this meme coin, it hit the market, people bought it, and then the creators of it sold their share and the price crashed. So that is what a meme coin can do. So
Is that illegal? Is that illegal to do that? I mean, that sounds like a pump and dump to me.
Yeah, they are, and they're being investigated for that. So it's a thin line, though. I mean, these are things that don't have any intrinsic value to begin with. You know, where do you draw the line? You know, it's something that regulators are going to have to look at. How much money has to change hands? How big of a dump has to happen for them to go ahead? So, you know, think about this as, again, like memorabilia. Think about it as political memorabilia that you hope the value rises. You know, it's like buying a MAGA hat, and instead of just wearing it, enjoying it, you have a picture of it, and you hope that over time people will want to show their support for Donald Trump, and they'll want to buy that meme coin. And that will allow him to make some more money, because he profits from when it's traded. And he and another business partner own about 80% of the meme coin. It hasn't all been released. They're going to release it over the next few years. But those two are sitting on 80 million. Sorry. They've got, Trump has made, we have him at $200 million after taxes is what he's made so far from this. And it's currently trading at about $8.90. Yeah.
This is crazy. There is no intrinsic value to anything that you have told us about so far. And it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. What the angle is to gamify it. So in this case, it is worth something, because owning enough of it gets you a trip to his golf club, dinner with him, White House tour. There's talks that they may do other things. Like if you have enough of this, maybe there are other tours to get. Maybe you'll get physical merchandise. You know, you could do this. You could do this as a newsletter. I'm not suggesting you should, but you could put out a meme coin and have it be that anybody who owns the meme coin will get your newsletter. And you would cap it at like a certain amount. And the thought would be like, wow, you know, her newsletter is just so good. I really need to own this. You know what? I will pay 3 times what she was originally charging to buy it. Again, I'm not suggesting you do this, but that is a way you could use this meme coin, like another sort of purpose for it.
Okay, it does feel, and I'm not there yet, but it feels like there is a huge philosophical problem with this that we can talk about some other time. But this is just, I'm sorry, I'm actually having a hard time wrapping my head around this. But I mean, honestly, it just sounds like the weaponization of Beanie Babies. But anyway, I'm sure I can think this through better than I am so far. So now we've got the digital trading cards, World Liberty Financial, the USD1 stablecoin. Now we have a meme coin. Are we done yet?
Nope, not yet. Yep. We have Trump Media and Technology Group, which is the oldest one of these companies, but one of the newest to actually get into crypto. So people are more familiar with this being the company that is behind his Truth Social Twitter knockoff site. And it's also the parent company of the Truth Plus streaming platform. Those businesses haven't done too well for him. You know, I think last year it generated about Truth Social generated about $4 million worth of revenue and lost more than $100 million. Now, tech companies often lose a lot when they start. You know, they don't make profits right away. Eventually they will. You know, look at Jeff Bezos. I don't think Amazon made profits up front, but look at his wedding. He ended up doing all right by it. They're usually generating more revenue than this. The revenue is paltry. You know, I looked into in a way to get money to Trump. I was wondering if people were buying ads on Truth Social or Truth Plus, and the money was just so little that clearly that's not something people are doing. But what they recently did was they expanded into crypto as well. They had a private sale where they sold about $2.5 billion worth of stock and debt to around 50 institutional investors. And then they're using that money to buy Bitcoin. So at this point, they're establishing a Bitcoin reserve. So if you are buying shares in Trump Media, you are essentially buying shares in that Bitcoin reserve with a little extra social media business on top of it.
Okay, so explain to people what Bitcoin is.
So Bitcoin is the first most famous cryptocurrency. It is traded on the blockchain. It is the one whose value is just shot up. I think right now it's trading at about $109,000 to one Bitcoin. There's famous stories out there of people who bought Pizza dinners back, when Bitcoin first came out and there were places that would accept it as currency. Somebody bought a pizza dinner for 11 Bitcoin. And then you do the math years later and you find out that didn't work out all that well. But who knew?
Because it's worth huge. Now 11 Bitcoin is hugely valuable.
Exactly. It would be each one is $109,000. So you're talking over $1 million right now that somebody would have spent on a pizza dinner. And it's the most famous one. It also has wild swings. I've seen it go in the last couple months anywhere from like the 90,000 range to the $110,000 range. And by a company buying this and you were then investing in the company, you're kind of distancing yourself a little bit from that swing. And it's also more manageable. You can just buy and sell stocks on your regular brokerage fund. So as opposed to having to set up a crypto wallet, go through the process there, it's easier for some people to just do it this way. And there are also entities out there that aren't allowed to invest directly into crypto products, so that what they do is they buy companies that invest in it. Michael Sayer of MicroStrategy is the one who really launched this and has done quite well by himself for it, where the company is largely issuing stock, issuing debt, using it to buy crypto, and then more institutional investors and other investors will come in, buy shares of this company. He's able to then sell more shares, sell more debt, and buy more crypto. So that is essentially what they're mimicking here.
Do you know, Zach, to me, it really just sounds like quicksand. Like knitting this thing through our finances seems to me to be, there's no there that I can see.
The argument for crypto is that it can be more direct and it can be faster and it can help people who are unbanked. Now, I don't know if that merits its existence. Recently I spent probably the most money I'll ever spend, bought a house, had to transfer a significant amount of funds. I couldn't just pick up my phone and do it through Venmo. The money had to go from me to escrow to the buyer. And that involved me, it was more than what I could just do on the bank's website. I had to call the bank, wait online, go through this whole process, listen to this. It was 20 minutes by the time I got the money. 20 minutes, not a huge deal. If I wanted to do it through crypto, it would have been a minute or two. Now, for me, that doesn't matter. I'm not regularly moving mass sums through the financial systems, but it just doesn't see, for that as a common person, it didn't seem to be advantageous whatsoever. And the same with the unbanked. If you're having problems getting, which I do find rich, a lot of the people who are pro crypto and saying it helps the unbanked are the same people who just, devastated US aid, which helps a lot of people who are unbanked. So that argument's a little bit but ideally it would help them. They do not need to have that middleman. They do not need to go through the government. You don't have to worry about a government shutting you out. Donald Trump Jr. talks about how government shut the Trump organization out after January 6th. And, crypto provides a way for them to get to move money. Not really sure that happens. I know there were a lot of lenders who weren't inclined to deal with them, but they still were able to find somebody to refinance Trump Tower within a year or so. So, I don't necessarily know if those arguments merit its existence, but those would be the reasons for having it.
Okay, so tell us this, and I hope you'll come back because this is really interesting. I don't know if anybody else feels this way. My head's kind of exploding, and I knew a lot about this to start. So I feel like we should do it in smaller bites than bigger bites. And I don't know how to ask this without either sounding clueless or rude, but why does this matter to us? Why do we care that Trump is, doing the meme coins and all that? Why does any of this matter? Or maybe it doesn't. Does it matter?
Yeah, I absolutely think it matters. You look at Donald Trump, just anecdotally, he would have been better off financially if he had just taken his inheritance and stuck it in an index fund up until the time Truth Social launched. And now that has changed remarkably because of these instruments out here. So you've seen the president's wealth skyrocket. It's made it easier than ever for people to give him mass amounts of money. You could just sit on your couch and buy these invisible products and give him money that way. The other issue is you're seeing an overlap of what's going on with his business with what's going on in his administration. Just yesterday, they announced that they're looking into being able to use stable coins, or crypto rather, as an asset when considering how much you can borrow for your mortgage. Now, crypto prices can swing dramatically, but they're not going to require you to sell the crypto. So I believe it's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, when they're looking at mortgages, that benefits Donald Trump, because that means people are going to be able to hold their crypto. They're not going to have to sell it. So the more people that are holding crypto, the better. We've seen the Genius Act, which is there to regulate stablecoins. And it provides some much needed guidance, I think, for stablecoins. Critics like Elizabeth Warren would argue it doesn't go nearly far enough, and that it just kind of makes people feel confident about a product that doesn't have the real safeguards there. Well, who has one of those stable coins that meets the minimum requirements, or will once it starts releasing audits that meets the minimum requirements? Donald Trump. So you're seeing a very big overlap there. It seems to me, looking at, having paid attention to Trump's finances now for almost 10 years, the big lesson for him on the first term is that he just left money on the table. And this second term, they're just coming back for it. They're being unapologetic. We talked about how they looked at having the G7 at Doral and then walked it back. This term, they're not going to walk anything back like that. It is just going to be grabbing as much cash as he possibly can. And crypto's the way he's doing it.
Okay, can I ask one more question before I let you go? And that's that it certainly looks to me, somebody like me, as if the extremely wealthy people around the world are putting together deals through things like crypto to create sort of a permanent, extraordinarily wealthy class. Is that an overstatement, or is that what's going on?
No, I think it's somewhat similar to how traditional finance works. Think about who gets in the IPOs. It's the big clients of the banks that are doing it. And then they put them on the market, and it's the secondary, tertiary people buying it on the stock exchange. Just a few shares who are the ones who are paying for that price to go up and then getting stuck when it goes down. So you're absolutely seeing that. But does it differ from a lot of other financial instruments? No, probably in severity. I would certainly say that. You look at just the extreme of the meme coin. There were some reports about, how just a small fraction of people who bought the meme coin made mass amounts of money, and then it was like tens of thousands lost money on it. And that's kind of what we're seeing here.
So I don't want to stop asking you questions. I feel like we could talk all afternoon, and I know that's not a good thing, because it's good to keep these at about a half an hour. I really hope you'll come back. This was incredibly helpful. I hope everybody else enjoyed it. And enjoy, that's the wrong word, but I feel a lot smarter than I did 40 minutes ago. So thank you for being here, and please come back. And just a reminder, this is Zach Everson. He is a staff writer at Forbes and writes, you publish pretty much every day on finances, right?
A few times a week.
Really?
Now I feel guilty because I haven't published in several days. I'm working on something. I have something good coming, I think, but it can be any time, to like 3 times a week to once a week, typically.
Oh, isn't it funny? I feel like I see you more than that, but I follow Zach on social media, and when when you publish a new article, you do say so, and you say what it's about. So if you're interested in these issues, I urge you to follow him and to check him out, because obviously he knows this stuff, and it appears that we need to as well. Thank you so much for being here, Zach, and thank you everybody else for being here, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.